The subway car sways gently as it barrels through the dimly lit tunnels beneath New York City. It's late evening, and the train is sparsely populated. A couple of teenagers with backpacks are chatting quietly near one door, while a middle-aged woman scrolls through her phone at the far end. Tom Hanks sits in a corner seat, his baseball cap pulled low, blending in with the everyday commuters. He enjoys the anonymity the subway affords him, a rare break from the public eye. Tonight, he's heading home after attending a casual meeting in the city, his mind on the dinner waiting for him at his apartment. At the far end of the car, a man rises from his seat. He's tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a worn leather jacket that's frayed at the edges. His jeans are dirty, and his boots scuff loudly against the floor as he begins pacing. His eyes scan the train, settling on Tom. Tom doesn't notice at first, lost in thought as he stares out the window at the rushing darkness. But when the man starts walking toward him with slow, deliberate steps, Tom feels a shift in the atmosphere. He looks up, meeting the man's gaze. "Hey," the man says, his voice low and gravelly. He stops a few feet away from Tom, standing in a way that blocks the nearest exit. "Good evening," Tom replies calmly, his tone friendly but cautious. The man's lips curl into a humorless smirk. "You look like you're doing pretty well for yourself." Tom tilts his head slightly, studying the man. There's an intensity in his eyes, a mix of anger and desperation. "I suppose I can't complain," Tom says carefully. "How about you? Everything okay?" The man snorts, shaking his head. "Not even close. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I need cash, and I need it now." He steps closer, towering over Tom. "Hand over your wallet." The subway car jolts slightly, and Tom grips the edge of his seat to steady himself. His mind races, but he keeps his face composed. "I'm not looking for trouble," Tom says, raising his hand slightly in a placating gesture. "If you're in a tough spot, maybe we can figure something out." The man narrows his eyes, his posture stiffening. "I don't want to figure something out. Just give me the money, old man. Don't make me ask twice." The words are sharp, and though the man hasn't displayed a weapon, his size and demeanor make the threat clear. Tom feels the eyes of the other passengers darting toward them, though no one intervenes. "Okay," Tom says, keeping his voice steady. He slowly reaches into his pocket and pulls out his wallet. "You seem like a smart guy. I'm guessing this isn't something you'd normally do." The man scoffs. "What do you know about me?" "I know you don't want to hurt anyone," Tom says, holding out the wallet but not letting go of it yet. "I can see it in your eyes. You're scared, not angry." The man freezes, his hand hovering near the wallet. For a moment, the mask of intimidation falters, and Tom sees the exhaustion and pain beneath it. "Yeah, well, scared doesn't pay the bill," the man mutters. He grabs the wallet, but Tom doesn't resist. Instead, he leans back slightly, his gaze still fixed on the man. "What's your name?" Tom asks. The man hesitates, thrown off by the question. "Why do you care?" "Because I don't think you're a bad person," Tom says, "and I'd rather call you by your name than just, 'Hey, you.'" The man exhales sharply like he's debating whether or not to engage. Finally, he mutters, "It's Eric." "Nice to meet you, Eric," Tom says with a small smile. "I'm Tom." Eric stares at him, his brow furrowing. "You're really calm for a guy getting robbed." Tom chuckles softly. "Well, I've been around long enough to know that most people aren't as bad as they seem. You're not doing this because you want to. You're doing it because you feel like you have no choice. Am I right?" Eric shifts uncomfortably, glancing around the car. The other passengers are pretending not to watch, their heads bowed over their phones. "Maybe," Eric mutters, "but that doesn't change the fact that I need money." Tom nods. "Fair enough. But let me ask you this. How much would it take to make you feel okay, even just for tonight?" Eric blinks, caught off guard by the question. "What? Enough for food, a place to stay?" Tom presses. "Or is it something bigger? Something you feel like you can't fix on your own?" Eric doesn't answer right away. His hand tightens around the wallet, but he doesn't open it. Instead, he looks down at the floor, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I don't know," Eric says finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm tired, man. Tired of fighting to survive. Tired of feeling invisible." Tom leans forward, his expression softening. You're not invisible, Eric, and you don't have to do this alone. Eric looks at him, his jaw clenching as if he's trying to hold back emotion. The train slows as it approaches the next station, the screech of the brakes filling the silence between them. Look, Tom says as the doors slide open, why don't we step off here and talk? I'll buy you dinner, and we'll figure something out. No judgment, no strings attached. Eric stares at him, the wallet still clutched in his hand. He looks at the open doors, then back at Tom. Why would you do that? Eric asks, suspicion lacing his voice. Because everyone needs help sometimes, Tom says simply. The train announces its departure, the doors starting to slide closed. Eric hesitates, then makes a decision. He tosses the wallet back onto Tom's lap and steps off the train, motioning for Tom to follow. Tom picks up the wallet and smiles, standing to follow Eric onto the platform. The two men walk toward the station exit, the tension between them beginning to ease. As they step into the cool night air, Tom glances at Eric. So, where's the best diner around here? I'm starving. Eric shakes his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite himself. You're something else, man. I know a place a couple blocks away. Lead the way, Tom says. Together they set off down the street, the city's lights glowing brightly above them. The cold night air bites at their faces as Tom and Eric emerge from the subway station, the bustling streets of New York City alive with activity despite the late hour. Yellow cabs honk their horns, and groups of people move briskly along the sidewalks. Tom pulls his jacket tighter around himself, glancing at Eric, who shoves his hands deep into the pockets of his worn leather jacket. They walk in silence for a few moments, the only sound between them the shuffle of their footsteps. Tom studies Eric out of the corner of his eye. The man seems tense, his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. So, Tom says, breaking the silence, you mentioned a diner nearby? Eric nods and jerks his chin toward the right. Yeah, it's nothing fancy, but they've got good coffee and hot food. Sounds perfect, Tom replies with a smile. Lead the way. Eric hesitates for a moment, as if questioning his decision to let Tom follow him, but then turns and starts walking toward the diner. Tom keeps pace with him, his easygoing demeanor a stark contrast to Eric's guarded posture. You've lived in the city long? Tom asks, trying to spark a conversation. Most of my life, Eric says curtly. Tom doesn't push, giving Eric the space to talk on his own terms. They continue walking, the neon sign of the diner coming into view. It's a small, slightly run-down establishment with a glowing red sign that reads Sam's Diner. The windows are fogged up, but the warm light spilling out onto the street is inviting. As they step inside, the smell of frying bacon and freshly brewed coffee fills the air. A waitress in a faded uniform looks up from behind the counter, her eyes widening slightly as she recognizes Tom. Welcome to Sam's, she says, her voice cheerful, but tinged with curiosity. Take a seat anywhere. Tom gives her a polite nod and motions for Eric to choose a booth. Eric picks one in the back corner, far from the other patrons, and slides into the seat. Tom sits across from him, setting his wallet on the table. You didn't have to throw it back at me, you know, Tom says with a teasing smile. It was yours for the taking. Eric smirks faintly, though he still seems uneasy. I'm not a thief, he mutters. I didn't know what else to do. The waitress approaches, setting down 2 laminated menus. Can I get you gentlemen something to drink? Coffee for me, please, Tom says. Same, Eric adds, avoiding her gaze. She nods and walks away, leaving them alone again. Tom picks up his menu and glances at it. Anything you recommend? Eric shrugs. The pancakes are good, cheap too. Then I'll have the pancakes, Tom says decisively, setting the menu down. Eric looks at him, his brow furrowing. You're not even gonna look at the rest of the menu? Nah, Tom replies. Pancakes sound perfect. And besides, I trust your judgment. Eric shakes his head, clearly baffled by Tom's laid-back attitude. So, Tom says, leaning forward slightly, tell me a bit about yourself, Eric. What's your story? Eric snorts. What does it matter? You're just some rich guy passing through. You'll forget about me by tomorrow. Tom's expression softens. I won't forget. I don't believe in treating people like they're invisible. So if you're comfortable sharing, I'd like to hear it. Eric hesitates, his fingers drumming against the table. Finally, he sighs and leans back in his seat. I used to work construction, he begins, his voice low. Good pay, steady hours. But then the site I was working on shut down. Layoffs hit, and I couldn't find another job fast enough. Bills piled up and, well, you can guess the rest. Tom nods, listening intently. That's tough. The system doesn't make it easy to bounce back, does it? Eric shakes his head. Not at all. I tried everything. Odd jobs, temp work, but it wasn't enough. Eventually, I lost my apartment. Been couch surfing and sleeping in shelter since. The waitress returns with their coffees, setting the steaming mugs down in front of them. Ready to order? She asks. Tom gestures for Eric to go first. I'll take the pancakes, Eric says reluctantly. Make it 2 orders of pancakes, Tom adds with a smile. The waitress jots down their order and leaves again. Tom wraps his hands around his coffee mug, the warmth seeping into his fingers. Thank you for sharing that with me, he says sincerely. I can't imagine how hard that's been for you. Eric shrugs, though there's a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. It is what it is. Tom takes a sip of his coffee, thinking for a moment. You know, Eric, I've been incredibly fortunate in my life. I've had opportunities and support that not everyone gets. But I've also learned that the best thing we can do with what we have is help each other. That's why I wanted to have this dinner with you. Eric looks at him, suspicion creeping back into his expression. What's your angle, man? Nobody does this stuff for free. No angle, Tom says with a shrug. I just believe in kindness, and I think you could use some of that right now. Eric stares at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether or not to trust him. Before he can respond, the waitress returns with their food, setting down 2 plates piled high with golden pancakes. Tom picks up his fork and grins. Let's dig in. Eric hesitates, then picks up his own fork and takes a bite. The tension between them starts to ease as they eat. The warmth of the diner and the simple pleasure of a hot meal breaking down the walls Eric has built around himself. For the first time in what feels like years, Eric allows himself to relax, even if only for a moment. The pancakes disappear from their plates, bite by bite, as the tension between Tom and Eric continues to melt away. The clinking of forks and the low hum of conversation from the other patrons fill the diner, creating a comforting backdrop to their unlikely meeting. Eric leans back in the booth, rubbing his stomach. Man, I forgot how good real food tastes. Been living on whatever I can scrape together, mostly canned stuff and gas station sandwiches. Tom nods, wiping his mouth with a napkin. There's nothing like a warm meal to remind you of the good things in life. I'm glad we came here. Eric glances at him, his expression softening. I don't get you, Tom. You've got everything, money, fame, a good life. Why waste your time on someone like me? Tom sets his napkin down and leans forward, his eyes kind but serious. Because I know what it feels like to struggle. No, I've never been in your exact situation, but I've had my share of hard times, and I've seen firsthand how one act of kindness can change everything. Eric frowns as though struggling to believe him. Hard times? You? Tom chuckles lightly. I know it's hard to imagine, but yeah, I didn't come from wealth or privilege. My family wasn't poor, but we weren't rich either. And before I made it in Hollywood, I worked a string of jobs just trying to get by. Bellhop, waiter, you name it. Eric raises an eyebrow. You were a waiter? Tom nods. Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I learned more about people and hard work in those jobs than I ever did from any acting class. It taught me to value every person I meet, no matter where they're at in life. Eric looks down at his empty plate, his hands fidgeting with the edge of his jacket. I don't know if I buy that. People like you don't have to deal with the stuff people like me go through. Tom tilts his head, considering his words carefully. You're right. I don't know exactly what you've been through, and I wouldn't pretend to. But what I do know is that life has a funny way of surprising you. Sometimes when things seem darkest, that's when the light shows up. Eric scoffs, but there's no malice in it. Only disbelief. You sound like a fortune cookie. Tom laughs, the warm sound cutting through the lingering tension. Maybe I do, but that doesn't make it any less true. The waitress returns to clear their plates, refilling their coffee cups with a smile. Anything else I can get for you, gentlemen? Tom shakes his head. We're good, thanks. As she walks away, Eric leans forward, his expression unreadable. So what's the catch? Are you going to post about this on social media? Make a big deal about how you helped some guy in a diner? Tom's face softens, his tone calm but firm. No, Eric, this isn't about me. It's about you. I'm not here for attention. I'm here because I believe in treating people with respect and kindness. That's it. Eric studies him for a long moment, as if searching for a hint of insincerity. Finally, he lets out a long breath, the tension in his shoulders easing. You're serious, aren't you? Dead serious, Tom says with a small smile. For the first time, Eric allows himself to believe it. He leans back in the booth, a flicker of something like hope crossing his face. Okay, Eric says quietly. I don't know why, but thanks. For real. Nobody's ever treated me like this before. Like I matter. You do matter, Tom says firmly. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Eric nods, his gaze dropping to the table. The vulnerability in his expression is raw and unguarded, and for a moment, the weight he's been carrying seems to lift. So, what now? Eric asks, his voice hesitant. Well, Tom says, you've got a couple of choices. You can keep going the way you've been, doing whatever it takes to get by, or you can let this be the moment things start to change. I can help you get back on your feet, but you've got to want it. Eric looks at him, his jaw tightening as he considers the offer. Help me how? Tom takes a sip of his coffee, his tone casual but sincere. A place to stay for a while, a hot shower, clean clothes, a chance to figure out your next steps. I've got some connections, people who can help you find work, but it's up to you. Eric stares at him, the disbelief clear on his face. Why would you do all that for me? Because someone did it for me once, Tom says simply, and because I believe in paying it forward. The words hang in the air, heavy with meaning. For a moment, Eric doesn't respond, his mind racing as he tries to process everything. Finally, he nods slowly, a flicker of determination in his eyes. Okay, let's do it. Tom smiles, extending his hand across the table. Deal. Eric hesitates, then reaches out and shakes Tom's hand. For the first time in years, he feels a spark of hope, a chance to start over. As they finish their coffee and prepare to leave the diner, Tom looks at Eric and says, You've got a lot of potential, Eric. Don't let the past define you. The best is yet to come. Eric doesn't respond, but the faint smile on his face says more than words ever could. The warmth of the diner fades as they step back into the brisk New York night. Tom and Eric walk side by side, the city's chaos swirling around them, but there's a calmness in their shared silence. Tom glances at Eric, noticing a subtle shift in his demeanor, a faint lightness in his step, a sense of purpose beginning to form. You know, Tom says with a grin, it's not every day you get to have pancakes with a stranger who tried to rob you. Eric snorts, his face flushing with embarrassment. Yeah, well, not my proudest moment. Tom chuckles. It's behind us now. What matters is where we go from here. They make their way to the nearby parking garage where Tom's car waits. The sleek black sedan is parked inconspicuously among rows of vehicles, its polished surface gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Nice ride, Eric says, his tone carrying a hint of awe. Thanks, Tom replies as he unlocks the car. Hop in, I'll give you a lift. Eric hesitates for a moment, then climbs into the passenger seat. The leather interior is pristine, and the faint scent of cedar fills the air. Tom starts the engine, the quiet hum of the car barely audible. So, where to? Tom asks as they pull out of the garage and onto the street. Eric fidgets with the hem of his jacket. I don't know. I've been crashing at shelters and friends' couches when I can, but most of the time, it's just me in the subway. Tom nods thoughtfully. All right, let's take it one step at a time. I've got a guest house that's been sitting empty for a while. You can stay there for now, no strings attached. Eric's eyes widen. You're serious? Completely, Tom says. It's not much, but it'll give you a chance to regroup and figure out your next move. Eric stares out the window, his expression unreadable. Why are you doing this for me? I mean, you don't even know me. Tom glances at him, his tone calm but firm. Because everyone deserves a chance, Eric. You've had a rough time, but that doesn't mean you're beyond help. I've been given opportunities in my life, and I believe in sharing that with others. Eric doesn't respond right away, but the tension in his shoulders seems to ease. When they arrive at Tom's guest house, Eric is speechless. It's a modest but charming home, nestled in a quiet neighborhood. The porch light casts a warm glow, and the neatly trimmed yard adds to the welcoming atmosphere. This, this is for me? Eric asks, his voice barely above a whisper. For now, Tom says, handing him a set of keys. There's a stocked kitchen, clean clothes, and everything you'll need to get started. Take your time settling in. Eric takes the keys, his hands trembling slightly. I don't know what to say. Say you'll make the most of it, Tom replies with a smile. That's all I ask. Eric nods slowly, a flicker of determination in his eyes. Okay, let's do it. Tom smiles, extending his hand across the table. Deal. Eric hesitates, then reaches out and shakes Tom's hand. For the first time in years, he feels a spark of hope, a chance to start over. The weeks that follow are transformative. Eric wakes up each morning to the smell of fresh coffee brewing in the kitchen and the sound of birds outside the window. He takes long, hot showers, marveling at the simple luxury of clean running water. He spends hours filling out job applications, practicing interview questions, and slowly rebuilding his confidence. Tom visits often, bringing meals, clothes, and encouragement. They talk for hours about everything: Eric's dreams, Tom's experiences in Hollywood, and the small but meaningful steps Eric is taking toward a better future. One day, Tom surprises Eric with news of a job interview. A friend of mine owns a construction company, Tom explains. They're always looking for hardworking people, and I told him you'd be perfect for the job. Eric is stunned. You did that for me? Of course, Tom says. This is your chance, Eric. I know you've got it in you. The interview goes well, and Eric lands the job. He starts as an apprentice, learning the ropes and proving himself to be a reliable and dedicated worker. His co-workers are impressed by his determination and work ethic, and Eric begins to feel a sense of pride he hasn't known in years. Months pass, and Eric finds himself standing in the same subway station where he once crossed paths with Tom. This time, he's wearing clean, sturdy work clothes and a badge that reads, City Outreach Program. He spots a young man huddled on a bench, his clothes worn and his face weary. Eric approaches him with a kind smile, holding out a warm cup of coffee. Hey, Eric says gently. Rough night? The man looks up, his eyes filled with suspicion. What's it to you? I've been where you are, Eric says. Just wanted to help. The man hesitates, then takes the coffee with a nod of thanks. As Eric walks away, he glances at his phone. A message from Tom lights up the screen. Proud of you. Keep making a difference.
Eric smiles, his heart full as he continues his rounds. Tom's kindness had sparked a change in him, one he was determined to pass on. Kindness, he had learned, wasn't just a gesture. It was a ripple that could change lives, one act at a time.